Shabbat Shalom, everyone, as you're arriving. Shabbat Shalom, Bruchim Habayim. Welcome those in the sanctuary. So delighted that you're here. Welcome those at home as we join together for our hybrid Shabbat morning service. Service number 5, page 129. Let's all stand, if you're able and comfortable to do so, to stand for Matovu. And turn your kitchen, your living room, wherever you are at home, into the sanctuary that we all share.
Israel,
Together and the foot of page 129, and I think this impulse, this intention really captures for us as a congregation today, source of light, of truth, of the impulse within us towards justice and mercy. May this hour of worship be one of vision and inspiration. Help us to find knowledge by which to live. Let the words we speak enter our hearts and influence our lives. Bless all who enter this synagogue sanctuary in search of you or in need of comfort and consolation. May the offering of all our hearts be acceptable to you. May the prayers we utter here bear fruit in acts of kindness, peace, and love. Let's offer the blessing over Torah study together, singing with Dean.
Baruch atah Adonai
love this passage from the prophet Micah. Reinforces the way we see our Judaism, I think. So feel free to join me responsively in the English. With what shall I approach the Eternal One? Shall I come before God with burnt offerings or with yearling calves? Will God be pleased with thousands of rams? Should I give my firstborn for my transgressions? People tell you what is good, but what does the Eternal One require of you? So as an echo to that, we read an amalgamation, Mishnah and Talmud, that captures what it is to be a good Jew in the way that we understand it to be. These are actions which bring benefit here and now, but whose full value can be measured only in the light of eternity. Honoring one's father and mother, acts of love and kindness, diligent pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, hospitality to strangers, visiting the sick, enabling bride and groom, or bride and groom to rejoice, consoling the bereaved, praying with sincerity, making peace where there is strife. But the study of Torah leads to them all. Eternal God, may the words of Torah taste sweet to us, to all Israel, that we and our children and all the children of your people may come to know you by studying Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, hamalamed Torah le'amor Yisrael. Baruch shama v'haya ha'olam baruchu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamchulal b'fi amo meshubach umfa bilshon chasidav v'avadav. Bishvachot uvizmarot negadelcha v'namlicha malkeinu yachid chei ha'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai melech mechulal b'tish bachot. So I invite you just to turn to the top of page 134, where we read part of the Piyut, the poem written by Yosef Zvi Rimon, Polish, and then, of course, Palestine, Israel resident as he moved there, writing this Piyut. How shall I sing of mountains and hills when it is God who planted them? How shall I sing of deserts and seas when it's God who begot them? How shall I sing of earth and her fullness when it is God who bade them be? I shall sing of the one who fashioned them all, the one who is above them all. Of God, God alone, I shall sing.
Hallelujah.
stand as we move towards the Shema and her blessings. We're in the middle of page 135.
Yishtabach Shimcha Lad Malkeinu
Aleinu Leshabeach.
Sorry. I'm going to start again.
It's like enough to have one dean here.
Yeah, I got a bit freaked out then. Yishtabach Shimcha Lad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh B'Shamayim uVa'aretz Ki Lecha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avoteinu Shir Ushvacha Halel Ve'Zimra Brachot V'Hodahot Me'ata Ve'ad Olam Baruch Atah Adonai Habocher B'Shirei Zimra Baruch Hu Et Adonai
Sit down as we offer the two blessings before the Shema. The first of the natural world around us, light and dark, seasons changing. Let's read together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotze or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Hame'er la'aretz v'ladirim aleha barachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai. Kulam b'chochma asita, mela haaretz kinyanecha. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, v'yal morei or she'asita, yefarucha sela. Baruch atah Adonai, yotzeh hamorot. The second over love and distinctiveness of our way of approaching God. Ahava rabbah haftanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Chemla gdola v'yitera chamata aleinu. Avinu malkeinu ba'avo avotenu, shebatchu v'cha v'talmidem chukei chayim. Ken tachanenu talmidenu v'ten b'libenu lahavinu lahaskil, lishmoa lilmod u'lelamed, lishmo v'la'asot u'lekayem et kol divrei toratecha b'yahava. V'ha'er enenu b'toratecha. V'dabek libenu b'mitzvotecha, v'yached levavenu li'ahava u'li'ara et shemecha, kivanu v'charta li'echedecha b'yahava. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'yamo Yisrael b'yahava. Stand, if that is your custom, to stand for the Shema, our watchword of faith, as we offer these words before singing Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Amen.
Vahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol mo'odecha, v'hayu hadavarim ha'ele, asher anochi matzavacha hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech u'v'shofpecha u'v'kumecha, u'kashatam la'ot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot ben einecha, וכתבתם על מוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני
acknowledge the truth, reliability of the Shema as our watchword of faith. We utter the words, Moshe or Miriam or Bnei Israel, Lacha anu shira b'simcha rabba, va'amru kulam.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef melech.
שירה חדשה שיבחו גואלים, לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו.
Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Zu Yisrael, Guma be'ezrat Yisrael, Go'aleinu Adonai tzvaot shemo, Go'aleinu Adonai tzvaot shemo, Kadosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, God Yisrael.
So we now go to the Tefillah, our Amidah standing prayer, page 140.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imohot, u'Mevi Gula Livnei v'Neihem, Lama'an Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Moz u'Mashiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Vezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Machaye metim atah Rav lo Hoshia, Mashiv haruach u'morid hageshem, Mazriach hashemesh u'morid hatal.
Mechalkel chayim b'chesed, mechayim meitim b'rachamim rabim. Tzomech noflim v'rofech olim, umatir asurim, umakayem emunato lishenei afar. Ichamocha ba'al geburot, u'midom elav. Melech David u'machayeh, u'matzmiach Yeshua.
ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech ol haaretz kavodo.
כבודו מלא עולם,
Baruch geod Adonai mimkomo.
במקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי יקציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד עוד לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד עוד לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, בשבתך אלוהינו, מפין לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול, כי אל מלך גדול, הקדוש ברוך הוא, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד עוד לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש.
Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Let's sit down. That last paragraph of the Kedusha, Lador Vador, from generation to generation, I think really captures when we think of our children in the classrooms and some of us having grown up in this synagogue or choosing it now, this sense of intergenerational community that this one verse captures as we sing it. Let us mark Shabbat with Yismachu, page 143.
ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. מקדשי מקדשי שבי שבת, כולם ישמעו ויתענגו מטובך שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת. תמדד ימים עוד לא קראת שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. זכר למעשה בראשית שבת. זכר למעשה בראשית שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת.
Baruch atah Adonai Makadesh HaShabbat. Top of page 144. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu bi'amcha Yisrael. U'tefilatam bi'ahava tekabel. Eternal God, be gracious to your people Israel. In your love, accept their prayers. May our worship now and always be acceptable in your sight. Baruch atah Adonai she'otacha levadecha b'yera na'avod. And together, modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu le'olam va'ed. Tzur chayenu magen yishenu, ata hu l'dor v'dor, nodeh lecha נספר תהילתך, על חיינו המסורים בידיך, ועל נשמותינו הפקודות לך, ועל ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו, ועל נפלותיך וטובותיך שבכל עת ערב ובוקר וצהריים. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולך נאה להודות. As we go into our morning prayer for peace, I'm really struck, as will become apparent, we this morning are following Jamie's Mental Health Awareness Shabbat, and we'll be hearing from folk in the service. But I think about our morning prayer for peace really being about a prayer and an intention to live a life of ease, a life where we are safe from distress.
Shalom, Tova, Uvracha, Sim Shalom, Tova, Uvracha, Sim Shalom. Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha. Chem v'chesed berachamim. Chem v'chesed berachamim. Sim Shalom. Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, Amecha. Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha.
Baruch atah Adonai oseh hashalom. Let's take a few moments for silent prayer and reflection.
Ratzon, hearing thee. Ve'yon livi lefanecha, Adonai turi ve'goali, Adonai turi ve'goali, Ratzon irifi, ve'yon livi lefanecha, Adonai tzuri ve'goali, Adonai tzuri ve'goali. Say shalom bimroma, say shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol bnei Adam. Say shalom bimroma, say shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol bnei Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, ve'al kol
So we turn now to Kriyat Torah, the Torah service, the heart of our Shabbat morning service on page 481. This is a very rich Shabbat in our congregation this week because we are sharing the Bima. So delighted that Peter Bloch will be both reading Torah and Haftarah, sharing the Bima in that way, coming up, blessing it. And then, of course, we mark Mental Health Shabbat. But before that, Rabbi Chen Sofoni, who is a rabbi from Ra'anana, Israel, on sabbatical in London, that she chose, in London, Muswell Hill, even, to spend her sabbatical for 4 months, her Shemitah and rest absorbing. She was with us last night, delighted to be sharing Shabbat dinner with her, as we had a few other rabbis around the table. Our pride of rabbis around the table last night. But last night, Chen shared just a moment's thought on this week's parasha, on Bo, which I couldn't resist us hearing again today because it so anticipates our focus this morning. Okay. Lots of people use it.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's really I'm delighted to be here again. Thank you for inviting me. Last night I was sharing about the words in Hebrew, bo and paro. And bo, our parsha, when we say to somebody bo, we are inviting somebody to come closer. But God tell Moses, bo el paro. And something in the Hebrew doesn't work well, because bo is come close, and when you send somebody, you have to say go to, lech, not bo. You know this song of Idan Reichel? Bo itni li yad v'nelech. I don't know if you know it, but it's very famous. So it's inviting somebody to come closer, to have a hand, and to go together. And some of the commentators says that when God say bo el paro, it's not a mistake. God tells Moses, let's go together. Let's hold hand in hand. I know that this big mission that I'm giving you is too big. It's very hard. And actually, it's an invitation to be closer, to be together, and to know that in this very hard moment of Moshe, and also, our hard moments, God is holding hand and walking with us or with Moshe. And when he say Bo el Paro, he says Paro in Hebrew, it's also come from the root parua, wild, very hard, frightening, dark places. And actually, the Hasidic commentator says that it's not to Paro, this Pharaoh, this specific Pharaoh, but it's an invitation to come to our darkness places and to know that in these darkness places, God exists, God is around us. And I must say that for myself, many times when I'm in the big darkness, it's hard to remember that God is there. And maybe this parasha is inviting us to remember. It's like, the little light in the darkness. And one more thing about the darkness, that it said in the parasha that we're going to read very soon, that it was such a thick darkness that people could not see each other. And maybe when we're talking about mental health, sometimes it's so hard to see somebody who's in darkness, because it's like taking us to this darkness, and we're afraid from it. And the Mishnah says, how do you know that the distinguish between day and night? When does the night ended and when the day is starting? And one of the opportunities is when you can recognize somebody's face, not just a vague person, but you can really recognize. So maybe the invitation is to make effort to recognize the person, the personality of somebody who's in deep darkness, and to know that we are there sometime too. So we can know, and we can be the light just by looking in somebody's eyes. So may we have Shabbat Shalom, and the reading of the Torah going to bring light to our eyes. Shabbat Shalom.
So we're on page 481.
Ein kamocha va'Elohim Adonai ve'ein k'ma'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'kol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed Adonai od me'amo yiteim Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo
Gadlu l'Adonai iti onoramama shemo yachdav.
Lecha Adonai hagedula v'hagvura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'ha'od Kol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz Lecha Adonai ha'mamlacha v'ha'mitnaseh v'chol v'rosh
Let's sit down. So we are going to hear more about the first part of the parasha, Exodus 10, that talks about the plague of darkness. But we are on, as always, on our triennial cycle, and we're on the last part of the parasha. So Peter will be reading from the last bit of the portion of Bo, which includes within it the description and the rules of Pesach. And that very familiar verse, so critical to us, both in terms of understanding why on earth Pesach and the recreation of the Exodus every year at Seder is so important for us, but actually also our whole Jewish identity, that everything we repeat again and again, this story of the Exodus from Egypt, as the reason why we are Jews, the reason why we keep Shabbat, the reason why we should have gratitude, the reason why we should feel ourselves part of a community who have experienced some notion of liberation, historically or otherwise. It is part of our understanding now. So we'll hear from Peter that wonderful verse, "Vehigadata levincha bayom hahu lemor ba'avor zeh asa Adonai li b'tzeiti miMitzrayim." So where we are reminded, you must tell your child, every child, that on this day, it is because God brought me out of Egypt. So this is the story that permeates, that is the leitmotif of us as a people, and we have given and shared it with so many other peoples who know that life is about recovery, resilience, and getting out of narrow places. So delighted to be calling up Peter Ya'amod Shir ben David Likrat HaTorah. Just want to check. The scroll hasn't rolled on a little bit. No, it's exactly here. So let me remove this. Just want to show you. Yes, Moshe. Yeah.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvarach. Baruch Adonai hamvarach li'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bacha banu mikol hamim, v'notan lanu et Torato. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah. Vayoma Moshe el ha'am, zachor et hayom hazeh, asher yetzitem miMitzrayim, mibeit avadim. Ki b'chozek yad hotzia Adonai etchem mizeh. V'lo yachel chometz hayom etem yotzim b'chodesh ha'aviv. V'haya ki yiviacha Adonai el eretz haKanaani v'hahiti v'hamori v'haviti v'havosi. Asher nishba lavotecha latet lach. Eretz zevach halav u'davash. V'avoda et avda hazot b'chodesh hazeh. Shavat yomim toachal matzah. Uv'yom hashvi Chag l'Adonai. Matzah yachol et shivat hayamim, v'lo yireh l'cha chametz, v'lo yireh l'cha she'ah b'chol gevulecha. V'higata levincha b'yom hahu le'mor, ba'avor zeh asa Adonai li b'tzeitei miMitzrayim, v'haya lecha le'ot al yadecha, u'lezichron bein einecha, leman tiyeh Torah Adonai b'ficha, ki biyad chazaka hotzicha Adonai miMitzrayim, u'shemata et hachukeh hazot lemada miyamim yamima. V'haya ki yivacha Adonai el eretz haKanaani, ka'asher nishba lach, u'levatecha natata lach. V'avarta kol pete rechem l'Adonai, v'chol pete sagal behema, asher yiyeh lo haskarim l'Adonai, v'chol pete chama tifte b'seh, v'im lo tifte, v'avarta v'chol b'cha adam b'vincha tifte. V'haya ki yishalcha bincha macha lema, mazot, v'amata elav, b'chozek yad, hotziatnu Adonai miMitzrayim mibeit avadim. Vayhi ki hikshal paro l'shalchenu v'yaharog Adonai kol b'chol b'eretz Mitzrayim mi'b'chol Adon v'yad b'chol b'hema al kein ani zebeach l'Adonai kol pete rechem haskorim v'lo b'chol b'ni efter v'haya lo al yadecha l'totfot bein enecha ki b'chozek yad etzionu Adonai mi'Mitzrayim. And God spoke to Moses, saying, oops, sorry, wrong place.
Just the second down.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Vayomer Moshe el Ha'am, and Moses said to the people, remember this day that brought you out from Egypt, from the house of bondage, for with a strong hand Lord brought you out from there. And you must not eat unleavened bread on that day, on the month of Aviv. And it shall be, I shall bring you out to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, Hivites, and the Jebusites, which I have sworn to your fathers to give to you, a land flowing with milk and honey. And you should do this service, and this month, 7 days, you should eat unleavened bread. And on the seventh day, it should be a festival to the Lord. You should not have leavened bread upon your person or within your household. And you shall tell your son on that day, saying, because of the Lord brought me out from Egypt, and it shall be to you as a sign upon your hands and remembrance between your eyes, that you should, the words of the Torah should be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord brought you out from Egypt, and you should keep his statutes in their season from year to year. And when I bring you out to the land of the Canaanites, as I have sworn to you and to your fathers, to give to you, and all the firstborn animals shall be sacrifice which belonged to the Lord, and all and the firstborn of an ass you should redeem with a lamb, and if not redeem it, you shall sacrifice it. And all firstborn, the men you shall should come to the Lord, but your male son you shall redeem. And when your son says, what is this? And you should say to him, with a strong hand, the Lord brought you out from Egypt, from the house of bondage, and it shall, for when Pharaoh was stubborn, wouldn't let us go from the land of Egypt, all the firstborn animals and males sacrificable by the Lord, belong to the Lord, but you should sacrifice to the Lord. But the firstborn males of your son you shall redeem, and it shall be a sign between your eyes, a sign on your hands, and frontlets between your eyes, because with a strong hand the Lord brought you out from Egypt. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat hamet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yeshua, such beautiful translating as well. Thank you, Peter. Let's stand.
Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Le'amo Yisrael v'kedushato. Ronemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtakavu b'har kodsho.
comes from Chronicles, the second book of Chronicles. It's very unusual for us to have the Haftarah from Chronicles. Chronicles is one of the history books at the end of the section of writings. And here it captures that Passover was already being celebrated a few generations after Solomon. Once the kingdom of Israel was on rocky ground under Josiah, who's trying to steady it. Here we have an extraordinary celebration of Passover with 30,000 animals being killed. Very different from our Sederim here at Finchley Progressive Synagogue, despite having a goat at last year's. Peter.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotov, v'tzivanu lekra b'kidvei hakodesh. Josiah kept a Passover to the Eternal in Jerusalem, and they slaughtered the Passover lamb on the 14th day of the first month. He appointed the priests to their offices and encouraged them in the service of the house of God. And he said to the Levites who taught all Israel and were holy to the Eternal, "Put the holy ark in the house that Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, built. You need not carry it on your shoulders. Now serve the Eternal your God and God's people Israel. Prepare yourselves according to your father's houses by your divisions, as prescribed in the writing of David, king of Israel, and the document of Solomon his son. And stand in the holy place according to the groupings of the fathers, houses of your brothers and lay people, and according to the division of the Levites by the father's household. And slaughter the paschal lamb and consecrate yourselves, and prepare for your brothers to do according to the word of the Eternal by Moses." Then Josiah contributed to the lay people as Passover offerings for all who were present, lambs and young goats from the flock to the number of 30,000 and 3,000 bulls, and these were from the king's possessions. And his officials contributed willingly to the people, to the priests and to the Levites. Hilkiah, Zechariah and Jethiel, the chief officers of the house of God, gave to the priests for the Pesach offering 2,600 Passover lambs, 300 bulls. Kenaniah also, and Shemaiah and Nathaniel and his brothers, and Hashabiah and Jael and Jozabad, and the chiefs of the Levites gave to the Levites for the Passover offerings 5,000 lambs and young goats and 500 bulls. When the service had been prepared for, the priests stood in their place, and the Levites in their divisions, according to the king's command. And they slaughtered the paschal lamb, and the priests threw the blood they received from them, while the Levites flayed the sacrifices. And they set aside the burnt offerings that they might distribute them according to the groupings of the fathers' houses of the lay people, to offer to the Eternal, as it is written in the book of Moses. And so they did with the bulls. And they roasted the Passover lamb with fire according to the rule. They boiled the holy offerings in pots and cauldrons and in pans, and carried them quickly to the lay people. And afterwards they prepared them for themselves and for the priests. And because the priests, the son of Aaron, were offering the burnt offerings and the fat parts until night, so the Levites prepared for themselves and for the priests, the sons of Aaron. The singers, the sons of Asaph, were in their place according to the command of David. And Asaph and Herman and Jeduthun, the king's seer, and the gatekeepers were at each gate. They did not need to depart from their service, for their brothers and Levites prepared for them. So all the service of the Eternal was prepared for that day, to keep the Passover and to offer burnt offerings on the altar of the Eternal, according to the command of King Josiah. And the people of Israel who were present kept the Passover at that time, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread 7 days. No Passover has been kept in Israel since the days of Samuel the prophet. None of the kings of Israel had kept such a Passover as was kept by Josiah. And the priests and the Levites, and all Judah and Israel who were present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. In the 18th year of the reign of Josiah, this Passover was kept. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol ha'olamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'amar oseh, hamdabai u'makayim, sheb'chol devarov, emet v'tzedek, al ha'torah, v'al ha'avodah, v'al כתבי הקודש ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך. ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Yeshua. 60 years, did you? Oh, how wonderful. 60 years to the day of Peter's bar mitzvah. Where were you? Where was the bar mitzvah?
It was the North End Synagogue, the grounds of the Hazel Inn.
Oh, okay.
A little bit different to this.
Yes, I'm sure, a little bit different.
I did
Oh,
propellant
wonderful. Let's stand for the prayer for our congregation, for the state of Israel. Eternal God, we ask your blessing on our Queen Elizabeth, the royal family, and all those who govern our country. Guide them with a spirit of wisdom and compassion so that they care for the citizen and stranger and bring benefit to all inhabitants of our land and the world. And let us say, Amen. And thinking of closer to home in our community, bless all our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel. Bless our congregation, its members. Be with those who seek your presence and all who are in need of healing, spiritual or physical. Let them know you are near to comfort and sustain them. May peace exist in the state of Israel soon and in our time. May you, eternal God, grant blessing to her, established as an age-old dream and home to the oppressed. May its leaders and citizens be inspired with a faithfulness to the aims of its founders. May the country be imbued with the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice always. May this Shabbat in our community renew our energy to build and sustain a better world and to deepen our gratitude of so much that surrounds us. And let us say, Amen. So we go now together to put the scroll away. We are on page 489. Ki lekach tov natati lechem, torati al ta'azovu. So let's sit down. So Jamie, the Jewish Association for the Awareness of Mental Illness, created, along with a couple of United Synagogue rabbis, Danny Epstein, I think, from Marble Arch Synagogue, came up with this idea of what would it be to have one Shabbat in the year to raise awareness of the spectrum of mental health, and that Jamie has really done so much to improve and change our understanding of mental illness and how the community is responsible for each other. So here in our synagogue this Shabbat, we are marking it as we did last night, and we'll do this morning. We have a team of 4 people from our congregation who have been working hard together, not just for Mental Health Shabbat, but along with other institutions in the borough of Barnet under our Alliance of Citizens UK to see what kind of changes we could create in mental health provisions in Barnet. Other boroughs all over the country have been working on it, and we particularly with a few folk from Hendon School, from Finchley Reformed Synagogue, from our synagogue, have really been trying to envisage what we would want to ask to create a better relationship with those who are choosing how money is spent, resources are offered across the borough. But this morning, we really wanted to draw attention to the connection with this plague, the plague of darkness. So I'm going to ask Bobby, if she's able to leave Libby for a moment, to come up and to share with us the words from Exodus 10. I should just say this is very unusual for us to have a screen inside our service. I would say that our synagogue is not yet back to how it always was pre-pandemic, but here we are with our spaced out chairs and our tech team in the corner. And this morning we're just trying out inviting those from home to be part of the service, because 2 of those on the mental health team are coming in from home, and that's why the screen is there. So all those of you at home, we may be seeing you here in the sanctuary, and it really adds to us being able to see you as we are seen here. Bobby.
Darkness. Why this plague for Mental Health Shabbat? This is from Exodus 10. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Hold out your arm toward the sky, that there may be darkness upon the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched." Moses held out his arm toward the sky, and thick darkness descended upon all the land of Egypt for 3 days. People could not see one another, and for 3 days no one could get up from where he was, but all the Israelites enjoyed light in their dwellings.
I'm just going to, before I ask Kathy to share that piece from Tchaikovsky that we found, to just say that the team really wanted to draw out the theme of empathy this morning, and we'll see by the readings that they've brought of what difference could we make this Mental Health Shabbat in terms of how we responded to the plague of darkness. I just wanted to share a commentary on that verse of this heavy, thick darkness that Rabbi Chen commented on, and now we just hear the words of Exodus. This darkness that was almost palpable, that kept people so afraid that they couldn't reach out and touch or see anyone else. Abraham ibn Ezra is one of our most distinguished Torah commentators, a scholar from Spain who wrote, "There are times when a thick darkness," he wrote, he was a traveller, "there are times when a thick darkness comes over the Atlantic Ocean, during which time it is impossible for a person to distinguish between day and night. And this lasts sometimes for 5 days or more. I myself have been there many times." Now we know that Ibn Ezra was a keen traveller. We know that he went as far as Baghdad in Iraq. Surely he did spend much time on the shores of the Atlantic and may indeed have witnessed fog as heavy as darkness. But when he said those words, "I have been there many times myself," what phenomenon may he have been referring to? It may not just have been the weather. It may have been something to do with an inner life and a sense of empathy for what others may have felt. So for me, I really wanted to use that verse for us to consider before we hear from the others, that idea of "I have been there many times before." And our understanding from this verse of the plague of darkness, which of course is the reason why Mental Health Shabbat is on this week, this parasha, is that darkness is an integral part, as Chen said, of our human experience. being human is not always easy, not always plain sailing, but that sense of facing challenge and coping with the heaviness of this darkness comes to us. The Persian poet Rumi wrote a beautiful poem that we use in our morning shacharit a lot. This being human is a guest house every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, a darkness. And so this morning we really wanted to draw on what it would mean to understand better and reach out. Kathy, if I can call on you now at home to share the next reading.
This piece that I'm going to read, in which Tchaikovsky consoles his beloved nephew, has really resonated with me. My sister and I spent a lot of our childhood, adolescence and young adulthood feeling quite sad and depressed. During the pandemic, and in fact a bit before then, my nephew has also experienced a lot of anxiety and sadness. And we have struggled really to empathise with him. Okay, so I'm just going to turn it here. Right. 1876. Tchaikovsky consoles his beloved nephew through a period of dejection and melancholy. Probably you were not quite well, my little dove, when you wrote to me, for a note of real melancholy pervaded your letter. I recognised in it a nature closely akin to my own. I know the feeling only too well. In my life too, there are days, hours, weeks, aye, and months in which everything looks black, when I am tormented by the thought that I am forsaken, that no one cares for me. Indeed, my life is of little worth to anyone.
This is a poem called Pandemic by Lynn, Unger, and it was written in November 2020. It spoke to me particularly because there's such a stigma with mental health, and it isolates both those experiencing difficulties with mental health and the families involved as well. And I thought the pandemic has given us new opportunities in a way. What if you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling, give up just for now on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Centre down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has come clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live.
Thank you, Bobby. And now over to Dora, who is our youth representative. I think Dora is...
Yeah.
Let's see, has Dora managed to get back in? Yes.
So as you know, we've been working with a variety of different organisations to focus on tackling and improving mental health for young people in Barnet, especially during the pandemic. COVID has taken a huge toll on everyone, especially young people. The availability of help has become even more scarce than before. The theme for this Shabbat is empathy, and it's important that we learn and connect and understand the issues people go through. There's a very dangerous thing that people could do, is that if they don't try hard enough to be empathetic, they could even force someone almost worse. I myself as a Christian have witnessed this firsthand, an overwhelming sense of anxiety that the future holds, as well as the forced isolation that made us disconnect from each other. There's an ongoing dilemma amongst young people, lack of education, support, only now offering it out to people when it may be too late. There's a culture around not being bad enough, wrong treatment, and it being a taboo to even discuss. We must work to get more funding, get specialised early onset help to validate people when they reach out and help society grow back into looking after each other. There's a quote by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a doctor who wrote lots about people grieving. The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and out of their depths. These persons have an appreciation, sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with the compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen.
Dora. And now finally, Lisa, drawing together empathy.
There is a passage from the Talmud that in its own way speaks powerfully to the question of the nature of the relationships between people and the power of empathy. Rabbi Haya bar Abba fell ill, and Rabbi Yohanan went in to visit him. Rabbi Yohanan said to him, "Are your sufferings precious to you?" Rabbi Haya replied, "Neither they nor their reward." Rabbi Yohanan said to him, "Give me your hand." He gave Rabbi Yohanan his hand, and he healed him. Sometime later, Rabbi Yohanan himself fell ill, and this time Rabbi Hanina visits and asks him the same questions and offers him his hand. The Talmud asks, why did Rabbi Yohanan wait for Rabbi Hanina to restore him to health if he was able to heal his student? The Talmud answers, they say a prisoner cannot generally release himself from prison, but depends on others to release him from his shackles. Today we've talked a lot about empathy and what does it mean? My definition of empathy, I like this one very much, is the ability to imagine or to try to deeply understand how another person is feeling, to try to walk in another's shoes. You do not necessarily need to experience what that person has experienced, but to try to walk in another's shoes. Most people who are experiencing distressing emotions and thoughts want to have an empathetic listener and to build connection. Holding on to someone else's distressing feelings and emotions can be painful, especially if it's your child or a person you dearly love. It can be like holding a spiky ball, uncomfortable to hold. Some of us might try to throw that ball back with fixing suggestions, try this, do that. Others might try to soften it by sugarcoating with sympathetic comments. It could be worse. Or by talking so much that you can drown out the voice of other persons. Empathy or empathetic listening is different. You try to contain by holding on to that discomfort and to focus on listening and connecting with the distress. To help validate a person's feelings, to help someone to feel less alone. And it's in that space of connection that we hope distress can ease. This is illustrated, this power of empathy is illustrated so beautifully by a video we tried to show yesterday. It didn't work. I'm hoping so much that it will. The power of empathy.
Just waiting for sound to come. We're enjoying the images. It's not because you've got the headphones.
No, it's going up through the Lynn system. Should be there. Must have changed something. No, I don't think we're going to do it for now. I'm really sorry. It was there. I don't understand where it's gone to.
Watch it anyway.
I guess it's about getting down into the hole and sitting with somebody and sitting with their distress. It's actually very funny, so we'll send the link.
It is very funny. It is very funny because we see one of the animals just peeking down while they're eating a sandwich, seeing someone stuck deep in a hole, and that sense that Dora, that Bobby, that Kathy from Tchaikovsky's beautiful letter, and that Lisa capture that empathy takes more than just watching or saying too bad, or at least things aren't so bad, but that we see the animal that climbs down into the hole and offers that empathy. So that's your Shabbat treat to take home. We'll make sure that you have the link to the film. I'm going to ask us to all stand now. Huh? Okay. I think we'll sing ourselves together. We always finish the service with Aleinu. We finish the service with Aleinu, the prayer that talks about the world that we might build, the world that could be better, the world that could be better because people will turn towards God. And I think in our contemporary language, we might understand that to be, for all of us, wanting things to be better, wanting to contribute, turning that more traditional idea of a Messiah into a messianic age where all of us together would improve things. So page 520, let's sing together. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה יוצא וראשית, אשר שם חלקנו לייחד את שמו, וגורם עלינו להמליך מלכותו, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויסד הארץ, קרוב בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, ידעת היום והשבת אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא אלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחתינו. And the foot of page 521. בנאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו So we now turn to our Kaddish. There are many members of our congregation who are mourning a death or marking a yahrzeit this Shabbat. We think particularly of Neil Branston, who died at the beginning of this week, whose funeral took place yesterday, and Shiva will be on tomorrow evening. Husband of Marilyn, father of Eve and Nan. We also think of Richard Jacques Abraham, brother-in-law of Raymond Dweck, uncle of Debbie, Miriam, and Hadassah Dweck. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. And to those whose yahrzeits fall at this time, Richard Tobias, husband of Brenda Tobias, Estella Jacobs, wife of Lionel Jacobs, John Slater, father of Roger Slater, Mary and Felix Hutra, parents of Caroline Sansoni and Paul Hutra. We've mentioned their names 2 weeks running so that Paul could hear this Shabbat. Derek Pugh, father of Helena Pugh, and Morris Needleman, our own beloved Morris, remembered by all of us here in our congregation of FPS. And Ruth Rappaport, mother of Anne Andrews. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. May those who remember and recall their loved ones be comforted in their loss, as we say the words of Kaddish with them. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shamei rabbah, bi'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'hayachon u'v'yomechon, u'v'chaye dochol Beit Yisrael, magala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam omer maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithada v'yitale v'yitalal shmed kudusha brichu, leila min kol berchata v'shurata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiram b'yama v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya, v'hayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei adam, v'imru amen. Let's sit down, and as we prepare to end our service, I turn to Tamara for our announcements.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Good morning, and I hope it's not too late for me to wish you a very happy new year as well. Whether you are joining us from home, from your living rooms, or here in the sanctuary, whether you have been a member of FPS forever, or you're a newcomer, or perhaps a visitor or first-timer, and I see some new faces and visitors in the congregation this morning. Thank you so much for coming. We're so pleased to have you with us. You're very, very warmly welcome here. It's such a lovely thing to have to put out additional chairs and to have a larger congregation than we were anticipating, and to know that even as we are having to put in place additional measures to ensure the safety of everybody who comes to the building to pray here, so many of you are making the extra effort to come here and be with us. So a very, very warm welcome. Thank you as ever to everyone who made this service possible, to our rabbi, our musicians, our welcomers, our security volunteers, and to everyone who participated in the service. Oh, I've omitted a very particular welcome. Welcome particularly to you, Rabbi Chen. How very honoured we are to have you with us. Thank you so much for illuminating this darkest of portions for us. We're so glad to have you here today. And to the others who participated in the service this morning, to Alex and Paula, to our bar mitzvah boy, Peter, thank you for giving us a little bit of an opportunity to share in the pride and joy that your congregation and community must have felt 60 years ago, and for repeating that with us today. And thank you to all of our mental health action team, to Bobby, to Dora, to Lisa, and to Kathy, both for reflecting on empathy with us this morning, and also for the ongoing work that you're doing to help to bring about real change in the borough of Barnet. And I know there'll be opportunities for the community to do more to help and support that work in the future, but thank you. A few community announcements for this week, which feels like quite a normal sort of a week. KT is meeting this evening. They've got plans afoot that I'll tell you about in a minute. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Cafe Ivrea is meeting. Morning meditation is carrying on as usual, Tuesday to Friday at 8:30. On Wednesday, our Hebrew class is at 1 and our Delving into Judaism class is at 7. So in some ways quite a quiet week, but looking ahead a little further, we have the family Tu B'Shavat Seder coming up on the 15th of January. And just for the time being, and I hope this will really be very temporary, we are trying to keep our Ivri, our children, and our main congregation separate from each other in the interests of COVID safety. So our Shabbat morning service on the 15th will be online only. And we have a community Tu B'Shavat Seder on Wednesday, the 19th of January at 7 p.m, which is also on Zoom. But we will have an opportunity to meet together in person to celebrate the festival outdoors. There's going to be a guided walk through Kenwood on Sunday, the 23rd of January at 10 a.m. And further ahead yet, but still this month, our Holocaust Memorial Day service will be on Thursday, the 27th of January at 7 p.m. And that will be led by our Kabbalat Torah group, who are involved in a very special project of study at the moment. And this is such an important moment for them and for us to have our young people leading us in this act of commemoration. And I encourage you to come and experience it. And we will also have a guest of honor, Jackie Weber, with us that morning. I think I've read that correctly. Janine Weber. I had a moment. I looked at it and I thought, that's not what I've got here. Janine Weber. And that will be hybrid, so you will be able to come in person as well as online to our Holocaust Memorial Day service. It only remains for me to remind you to say that in the interests of keeping yourselves and our community safe, please do take lateral flow tests before you come to synagogue, and please do ensure that you and your family are up to date with your vaccinations and your boosters. Otherwise, all I have to say is that on this mental health Shabbat, I wish that Shabbat may bring us all peace. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Tamara. So we're going to end. I'm sure Dean is hopping across the corridor. Maybe we can lure him away from the children. We're going to end with Adon Olam. But meanwhile, maybe this would be the moment to hand out the Kiddush plates, just so that we are safely offering Kiddush, so everyone has their own plate to be able to end the service. And children needing to be reunited with parents at the end of the morning will find you as we go to Adon Olam on page 525. So far be it from me to give you homework to watch television, but I really do urge you to watch this video that Lisa found for us that is really phenomenal and really captures the difference between concern and empathy. Let's have an upbeat, jolly gold. Okay, let's do this first.
Adon Olam Hashem Alav B'terem kol Yitzir Nivra V'et Nasa V'chefzo kol Azai Melech Shamo Nikra Ve'achari Kiblot Hakol Levado Inog Nora V'hu Hayach V'hu Odeh V'hu Yiyeh B'tifara V'hu Echad Le'in Sheni Laham Shilo Lahachvira V'li Reshit V'li Tachnit V'lo Ha'oz V'ha'misra V'hu Eli V'chai Go'ali V'tochevi V'et Zara V'hu Nisi U'manosvi Menachosvi V'yom Ekra V'yadu Avkid Ruchi V'et Isha V'ayira V'im Ruchi V'viati Adonai V'lo Yira.
Let's stand for final blessing and for our Kiddush. And if Dean and I just get tiny glasses of wine up here and just a tiny bit of challah, we don't need the big one, we will go straight into Kiddush. I'm just so struck by that last verse of Adon Olam that we're familiar with and offer every week, but is the perfect blessing for us today. B'yado avkid ruchi be'et ishan va'ira, ve'im ruchi gaviati Adonai li v'lo ira. Into your hand I place my soul, asleep or awake, you are near. With my soul and my body too, you are my God, and I shall not fear. And let's go into Kiddush together. V'shamru.
V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, l'dorotam berit olam, Beni uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, et ha-shamayim ve'et haaretz, uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen.
L'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And if you do fancy, after you've said Shabbat Shalom, you can hover around the screen and watch the film. I have to tell you, Paula, because I just have to share it with everyone. I've just received a message from your mother saying, please could you introduce yourself to Rabbi Chen? Yes, you. Yes, I know. I just thought, yes, exactly. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone.